So
Recording in progress.
also just to note something here, because I think this is really an important thing. And Dawn, when you were in
Through. Okay. Yes. I think I'm creating feedback. Oh.
There's a head. Okay. Same problem.
Okay, so now I can hear.
We can't.
You will have to monitor.
click on. Start waiting. Can you hear us now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Wicked echo, but yeah, we can hear you. It's just Jamie, all I can see.
Sorry, it's doing it from my iPad. So you have to look at me. I'll try to turn it to the person speaking.
Okay. Got it. Okay. So we're gonna have feedback. Where's the feedback coming from? Can you just mute your microphone? Okay. So Mr. Quinn, we had a question.
Hello, Mayor. I'm getting so much feedback that it's very difficult to understand. I heard my name, I believe.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, with an echo.
It's feeding into that, it's coming out the larger speakers. So we have output. We
just turn off the large speakers.
It's not the mic, it's not well, but it's feeding, so we're getting output from the through the sound system, but the input's coming through the microphones. That's where the feedback loop is happening.
Let's turn off the speakers.
Can you hear now?
Is there still feedback?
Well, it got a little better. Oh, now it's much better.
Okay. So
Okay.
do we have can you hear us now? Is that better?
Yes, now I'm getting one echo now, but I can hear and understand you.
Okay. So we had a question about.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is too much.
It's not working.
Yeah, this is too much.
Well, why can't we turn off the larger speaker system and then that will fix it?
All right. Is it off? It's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. Is that better? Press that button off. Put that on the top. Cut that one off. No, you just press the button right here. The button right there. In front of it.
It's a gray button.
Gray button.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, is that better? That's still better. That's not. Okay, that's not gonna work. All right, so we can't do it this way.
Well, is it still an echo?
Yeah.
Yes. If for like, if you guys say one sentence or two, it's okay, but after that it piles up and overwhelms.
Jamie, can you turn off the sound?
No, because if I turn off the sound of mine, it's the only thing that lets him hear us.
No,
Okay, I think we're doing better right now.
Can't hear them. They could still hear us. You can turn down your volume to nothing and they could still hear us.
Yeah, I could do that if you want me to.
Oh, it's happening again.
Coming through his computer.
That's not from my iPad. It's from probably phones and things like that.
Yeah, it's feeding
It's
through the
feeding
speakers,
this,
and it's hitting your microphone, and that's what the feedback is.
So why can't he do it on his computer? Why can't you launch the meeting on your computer?
That's what I just did.
So then What's on his computer?
Nothing. It's just the speakers.
No, but he's running the meeting still on his.
He just also logged in.
Mr. Gomez, if you log off of that system, what happens? If you
Then the public can't listen in. Yeah. Did you log into the city account on this?
Yes.
Yeah, that's.
I'm set as the host.
Yeah.
You probably should
turn
turn
it
off.
off. Turn it off.
I logged into city account.
You probably will, yeah. Okay, try now.
Okay. Is it still echo?
Great, so.
In the meeting. Okay. How's that?
I did not hear an echo just then.
Okay.
How's that?
No echo?
Hey,
There
this
we
is
go.
working.
No echo.
No echo.
No.
Right.
All right, great.
Everyone is just gonna have to speak up as loudly as you can, because they can only hear you if my iPad can hear you.
We can turn our mics
You can turn
on.
on your mic. Try your mic onto the, see what happens.
Is that an echo or no?
I didn't detect it.
Okay.
Okay, that's
Oh,
what
this- Where's your volume?
he still had the meeting on his system, so you had two
That's
meetings
why
in
it
the
was-
same
yeah.
room. That's why you have.
Stephen, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Sorry, everyone, for technical difficulties. We'll resume with our questions in the meeting. Mr. Quinn, we had a question as far as us having the charging station on government property and Georgia Power being able to charge a fee. Is that going to be an issue?
So, well, it's an issue in the sense that, I've heard some concern about it on the council, but I think you're asking me, is that illegal? And so the question that's implicated is the gratuities clause of the Georgia Constitution, which prohibits the city from giving away either its property or the use of its property without getting reasonable and adequate consideration in return. So in this instance, the proposed agreement would have, the consideration in return would be that the residents of the city are gaining access to convenient electronic vehicle charging. I mean, to me, that is a reasonable return. I don't know how to, I don't want to speak in absolutes because I'm not really sure how to value what Georgia Power would be getting financially. So if we were selling the property, for example, we can look at get an appraisal and see what it's worth. I just don't know how much Georgia Power would be charging, how much they'll be profiting, but I believe that this would be legal. And that's based on a few factors. One being that the city residents are getting something in return, access to the charging station. Another being that Georgia Power is a quasi-governmental entity themselves. They're a public utility. And yes, they operate for a profit, but they also provide a public service. So, I believe that the answer to the question is it is constitutional and that we can enter into the agreement whether Georgia Power were to charge users or not. I mean, that could be viewed as, if they charge, and it sounds like they want to, that can be viewed as them getting a return for their electricity. And the rental essentially of our property can be viewed as getting a return from Georgia Power as far as them making the electricity available to Clarkston residents where otherwise it wouldn't be, or they would have to go farther to get it.
Okay, and thank you for that. Yes, Councilwoman Hopkins has a question.
I don't know if turn the mic on or not, but I
You're
think you
fine.
guys were kind of locked out at the time when this conversation started. But Ms. Cui said that their intended rate is 25 cents a minute, which is $15 an hour for charging. So that to me would designate a commercial sale. And that's why I was concerned about doing that, using city property for a commercial sale for a business.
Right. Well, how much, does anyone know how long it takes to charge a car? Like, would it take less than an hour?
Well, people were saying from empty, it might be 2 to 3 hours.
Right. We were also saying that most people will probably do the vast majority of their charging at home. And this will just probably be a pick me up that they'll charge for a few minutes. To
Top
get
off.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so the city is not required to treat every transaction as a business would in order to comply with the gratuities clause. What we're not allowed to do is to give away public resources. So, I mean, to me, I think that you could make a legal argument that the benefit to the public is the consideration, because, for example, if someone's electric vehicle is running low and they're not going to be able to make it to their destination or to another charging place, then it could be very important to them in a given situation that they can go to the police station, which has been chosen because it's safe, and get charged up safely. And if they have to pay a little bit, they do, or they have to pay whatever that rate is. But I just think that it's enough of a public benefit, as I'm understanding it, to be adequate to not be a gratuity. Of course, I just received the question on the spot and I haven't done any specific legal research. So I'd be happy to do a little follow-up on this, because it's a little bit of a unique situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll ask you for the council meeting to do follow-up just to make sure in terms of verifying what you're saying, and especially with the gratuity clause.
I'll be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the council? Okay, hearing none, do we have questions from the public in the room? Hearing no questions from the public in the room, do we have questions for anyone on Zoom? And no one signed up, Mr. Gomez?
Not for this item.
Okay, thank you. So we're hearing that, we'll move on to new business, which is E1. Discuss review awarding contract for Market Street resurfacing and sidewalk SPLOST 08 capital project. And that would be Ms. Galway? Mr. Gomez. Mr. Gomez.
Yeah. This is the item where we issued a bid a few weeks ago for the SPLOST 08 project, Market Street sidewalks, installation of new sidewalks from City Hall Annex to the city line and extending to the end of Market Street, the dead end, as well as resurfacing Market Street and Carroll Park. We received 5 bids. That 3-page document I provided to all of you earlier today via email. Also, there's a copy up here. There are copies in the back of the room next to the agenda as well for anybody here. The 5 bids that we received, one was deemed not to meet the criteria. That was originally the lowest bid, Magnum Paving. However, they did not meet the criteria as outlined in the bid. Therefore, the next lowest bid is Omshiv Construction, a bid amount of $893,905.25, with an alternate bid amount for the additional item regarding whether we added a guardrail on a part of Market Street just north of 40 Oaks. We are recommending that we do award the bid to Omshiv. At this point, they are able to, I think, Claire, did we receive an estimated start time for if the bid were to be awarded next week?
Within 30 days.
Within 30 days of the award bid. And Mr. Kaiser, should you have anything to add, Larry?
No, we met with the public on the road, walked the project. The objectives of the project was to minimize cost, reuse existing granite where possible, slow the speeding vehicles on the road, and a number of other objectives. And I think we've met them all by placing the sidewalk on the road. The bid alternative that the city manager referred to is the original bid package has wooden guardrail. I add wooden guardrail in there based upon our conversations as we walk the road. In talking to, and there's not a lot of wooden guardrail that's placed except in national forest roads and so forth. The criteria to put in wooden guardrail is a little bit different than regular steel guardrail. And so I have to still work out some details. So what I did was, because of the unknowns, I put a bid alternative in there for steel guardrail. Brown, painted brown, the national forest brown color, which might be a good alternative. So that alternative is in there in the event that the wooden guardrail issues cannot be worked out. So we have guardrail addressed no matter what. Beyond that, there's a whole bunch of things that we spoke about in here. It's the same items we talked about before. The engineering estimate that I prepared for this project before we went out to bid was $957,000. So they actually came in about 6% less than the second lowest bidder, which, from my perspective, that's pretty good to be able to come in within that percentage and also under the engineering estimate. And so the contractor is ready to mobilize, and he can be on site within 30 days. We have a couple poles that have to be relocated. There's no way of avoiding those poles, no matter where we put the sidewalk, unfortunately. There are some other things that we're going to be doing, minimizing impact to a couple of very large mature trees. When you come around the curve on Market Street, there's a couple, 2 or 3 very large water oaks, and then we're going to be able to miss those as well with that. So that's where we are.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kaiser and Mr. Gomez. I had a couple of questions. In terms of the construction, what end of Market Street are you planning to start?
Totally up to the contractor.
Well, the reason I'm asking, because we're still doing, you said it'll be a month, probably a month out. We still have the SPLOST project where we're doing the bike trail.
Yes.
Then Georgia Power is going to do some work as well. So I'm trying to make sure in terms of that particular area not being overly congested with construction. So that's why I was trying to see where are the plans in terms of starting the overall construction.
Typically, here's what I would think the contractors want to do. They're going to begin at Rogers Street and go down Market from Rogers.
Okay.
And head towards the end.
Okay, and that's not going to cause any. Okay.
No.
All right.
What will happen is those poles will be moved right away, moving towards power. They still haven't moved the one on Roland yet. We asked them 6 months ago to do that one. They haven't moved 1 or 2 poles on Rogers Street. We asked them 5 months ago to do that. And so they have 3 poles on Market. So what the contractor would do is they'll build a sidewalk and they'll just go around those poles until they move them.
Okay. Council, did you have any questions at this time?
So I had one question. So I see here on this 3-page summary that it identifies 4 of the round of landscape easeabouts. My understanding from walking with the neighbors is originally the plan was to have 3, and then the neighbors discussed it adding 2 more, one kind of on the end of Market Street nearer to Rogers before the curb, and then one toward the other end.
Yeah, I missed the one on the curb. I remember that conversation now. So I added one at the very end, made 4, and I forgot that conversation with council. So we just add that. So there is a lump sum per easeabout. There's a number in there for I think it's $11,000 or $12,000 per ownership bid for each easeabout. So we can add that to the project. So you don't have to do anything. I have $25,000 contingency in there. I put that purposely for anything weird that comes along that we missed. So we can just take that out of contingency.
Okay, so does the council just pass this as is, or do we need to? Okay, and still have that 5th easeabout? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
That was my question.
Thank you. Yes, Vice Mayor Yasu.
Instead of passing it as it is, wouldn't it be feasible to actually change it between now and next week?
We can add an easeabout?
Yes.
Oh, no, there's no problem with that. We'll add that right to the design plans. The contractor, doesn't matter. they'll do it.
I think he's mentioning to add, you want
The
to add
financial
the
part.
$12,000 to the $893,000.
Don't need to.
We can't do that, actually.
Yeah, so what we got, can't do that. So I have $25,000 contingency in the, so I have a list of about 20 bid items, from resurfacing to sidewalk to curb and gutter, all of that. One of those 25 items is a contingency of $25,000 to be used for unknowns. So I don't have to come back to council and ask for a change order. So if it's not used, then it's not used. But if we want to use it for one of these ballots, we can draw down on that contingency.
Yeah.
My question is actually to add to the scope of the work before next council meeting. There is about to be added to the scope
You can do that.
and clearly stated there.
That's
That's what I'm
fine.
asking.
We can, yeah, we can do that part. Yeah,
Okay.
okay, that's fine. Okay, so we'll make sure, for the meeting, we will add 5 instead of 4. Okay, perfect. Any other questions from the council? Hearing none, are there questions from anyone in the audience?
Mr. Medford and Mr. Moore signed up to speak.
Okay, Mr. Medford,
Hello, I'll try to speak loudly.
we can hear
We can
you.
hear you.
Okay, good. So after observing how the sidewalk has been being going project here on Roland Street, I can already tell you this will have a wonderful effect on slowing people down on Market Street. Putting the sidewalk within that roadway has been absolutely the right choice, at least over here on Roland Street. And I think it's going to do the same thing for over on Market Street. Just the psychological effect of when two cars are heading towards each other. I've watched it over and over. Now they slow down because there's not as much room to get around each other. People have to actually pay attention. It has actually had this great calming effect. So, and also I'm looking at the design here, and seeing those ease abouts is going to be great to go through there to help also calm that traffic. So it's very exciting to me to see this project come together. As Dean mentioned a couple of weeks ago about how this has been in the plans for such a long time. And so finally seeing it to come to fruition is really awesome. So I want to thank you all for working hard on it. For Larry for putting the design behind it and everything and getting creative and solving these problems. So I want to thank everybody for working on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Medford. Mr. Moore.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, for the opportunity. I think that piggybacking on Brian's comments, I think it's time to seriously consider sooner rather than later installing the speed tables on College and Rogers Street and perhaps DeBell Street as well. As we move into this project, people are going to be trying to find shortcuts around it. Not that they don't already, but I think that with the upcoming development at the end of East, it would be wise to start this process of traffic calming on the auxiliary streets to this project and to East Avenue. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Gomez, anyone else sign up?
No.
Okay, thank you. That will conclude agenda item E1. We will now move to E2, which is to discuss adopting a resolution to activate the Clarkston DDA. Mr. Gomez.
I think this came from council to request to reactivate the Downtown Development Authority.
Yes, so
Mr. Quinn provided you a draft of a resolution to activate the Downtown Development Authority.
okay, thank you. And so what we originally did was we asked the state Georgia Assembly to dissolve the Clarkston Development Authority so that we could have the generic Downtown Development Authority, and this is the actual document now. And so with this, Mr. Quinn created the resolution for us to move forward with it. As you can see on the page where it has the participants and members who will be a part of this committee, one of the changes that we will have to make sure that we accommodate, the original one had 3 council members. This one will only have 1 council member. So we would probably, however we want to deal with these slots, we need to make sure we address the slots. So it's on this page if everyone is looking at it. And you'll see the terms for each one. And so, Mr. Quinn, did you have anything else as it relates to this document that you would like to discuss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not necessarily that I would like to discuss, but just to remind the council, you know, as you said, we have to choose who were well, they're called directors. Who will they be? And initially they have different lengths of terms. So which slot as far as 2, 4, 6-year term will each person get? Whether we want to appoint a member of the city council to the authority. And then another issue is on what date should it start operating? So there might be various considerations there. And one which is not necessarily the most important, but just occurred to me is on the anniversary of this date is when terms will end and reappointments are made. So, and I know that we right now have a municipal election coming up, and there will be every other year in November with people starting their elected council terms the next January. So if the city council would, for example, want the appointments to be made before elections or after new people are elected to the city council, then you could make that happen by timing the effective date of the resolution, i.e. the activation of the DDA, as far as where that, you know, choosing the date for that to occur.
Okay,
If I may,
yes,
one of the things we did not do is designate the area for the DDA.
okay.
So that's got to be first. And then on this document we have prepared, I think it'll be more helpful if we can give a description of what is required, one council member, businessman, just some things like that. You know what I'm saying? Because that was one of the things, who gets the 6-year, who gets the 4-year, who gets the 2-year.
Right.
So a little more information on that.
Well, I think we can pick who,
Okay, we can definitely.
and particularly since, you know, we had yourself, Councilwoman Hopkins and Vice Mayor Yasu, who were going to be our designees from the council. So, you know, among the three of you, you know, probably makes more sense to have Vice Mayor Yasu to take that slot. He could probably do the 2-year slot because that kind of coincides with his term as well. Then that can help us with the other individuals who wanted to participate, or however the council wants to address who will be the directors on there. Yes, Councilwoman Hopkins.
Just 6 years, 4 years, and 2 years for the first 6 years, right? And then when those first terms run out, it will continually be 6 years.
And sorry,
No,
sorry,
there'll be
up more.
4.
Speak up more on that end. I think the people on the chat are saying
Yeah,
they're having a
can you-
hard time hearing you.
Yeah, bring your mic down. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I was just asking, right now it designates 6-year terms, 4-year terms, and 2-year terms, and I just wanted to clarify that that's just for the first cycle of 6 years, and then after that, every term will be a 6-year term, correct?
No, the first part was correct, but the next round of appointments and all the future ones, those will be 4-year terms, not 6.
I also want to comment, Madam
Yes.
Chair, that the council member, either whoever is going to sit on it, regardless, cannot stay beyond his term. Soon as he's not serving the council, that is the end of it.
Right.
So whoever the next council to decide on that. So I just want to say, I mean, if somebody was appointed even for 4 years, he can't stay there for 4 years.
Right. So whoever as a council member, however how long your position is, once your position ends, then your appointment to the DDA ends as a representative of the council.
Absolutely.
Okay. And so 2 things that I've heard that we need to make sure that we incorporate. One is to designate the area. And Mr. Quinn, in terms of that designation, what exactly do we need to give to you to say that it's the downtown area? What is it that we need to specify?
Well, so we need to specify geographically exactly what the boundaries are. And so what I would need would be either a map that's clearly marked or a description using streets to, traveling to this street and turning on this street, or both of those two. I mean, I think a map is typical. And I would just suggest that, I mean, it depends on how big the area is going to be, but ideally it would be a map that is zoomed in enough to give good detail about what's in it and what's not.
Okay. And if we give you a map, do we have the option to adjust it in the future?
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the controls that the city council maintains over the DDA, is that its area of operation can be adjusted at any time.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes, Vice
In
Mayor.
order to activate it, do we need to actually select the individual members, or we can just activate it and then eventually fill the seats of the directors?
No, we need to go ahead and appoint at least a quorum of them. I think I'd have to check to give you a solid answer on, I'm quite confident that they need to have at least a quorum, but I think they all need to be appointed just based on this. I think the state law says that the resolution to activate would also appoint the initial slate of directors.
Because the last time, I know it could have been different resolution, but the last time the way we did it was we activated and then we filled the slots.
Right. Well, it's just that was under our special, unique statutory DDA local legislation. And so it's just a different set of rules in terms of the details. Like, for instance, in the prior version, it allowed multiple council members. So there are differences. I'd be happy to check on the question of, can we appoint less than all of the members in the initial resolution?
Okay.
Please, yes.
Okay, that would be great. Councilwoman Hopkins.
I'm still confused here. If ultimately all the terms will be 4 years.
No, that's not
so
right.
then isn't that what Mr. Quinn just said? After it's rolling.
Yes,
That's-
sorry.
Go ahead.
So there's a little bit of confusion perhaps, because in the state law about the DDA, it states in there that the terms are going to be 6 years. But when you keep reading, it says something like, however, after 1995, then the terms are 4 years. But so the current law is after the initial, which has staggered terms, that all the second wave and future wave appointments are 4-year terms.
Okay.
Which is why I'm wondering why we have 6-year terms in there. Like if half the DDA is going to be rolling over every 2 years, and it's going to be a different half of it every 4 years, why don't we just have everybody either 2 years or 4 years?
Well, it's actually 1/3 every 2 years. And I mean, as far as the why, I'm guessing the state set it up that way to have continuity, so that you would always have a majority of the group returning. So it's not half every 2 years, but it's 1/3 every 2 years.
Okay. So you still have a question look on your face, Councilwoman Hopkins. Okay. So again, this isn't necessarily something that we'll have to vote on next council meeting. This was to start the process so that, we could at least start the process of activating the DDA, make sure that we take the time to designate the area where we're going to have it, and ensuring the people who will be directors for it. Is that okay with everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
I definitely don't think it's ready probably
No,
for this council.
it's not ready
meeting,
for prime
so
time.
that-
So yes, thank you.
One question I did have for you, Mr. Quinn. Would it be helpful, I think, just for clarity's sake, to include a reflection of the state law in terms of the term limits? Because I could see, someone reading through this at some point, or even when this comes up for reappointments, there could be a little bit of confusion there, or we could just copy and paste something. I think could help resolve that on the front end.
Sure. Well, I don't think there are any term limits, but as far as the 4-year length of the term, I think I put that in there, but I'll make sure it's in there if it's not.
So yeah, if you can make sure you include that one, that would be great.
Yes, I'll be happy to.
And then the other question I had is,
Wait a minute,
sorry.
we have Councilwoman Johnson and then you.
Mr. Queen, we had selected people for the CDA. Do we have to go with that selection, or since that one was eliminated, can we do a new search?
The council is free to appoint the same people or different people. There's no, we're not restrained by those appointments to the CDA when appointing the DDA directors.
Okay. All right, thank you. And Councilman Carroll.
So does the geographic area have to be contiguous? Like if the council wanted to pick the downtown area and the Brockett area, but not the area in between, is that an option?
Yes, that's an option.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from council? Hearing none, are there questions from the community? Okay. Hearing none, Mr. Gomez, did anyone sign up for this item? Okay.
Dean Moore has his hand raised.
Okay, Mr. Moore.
Yes, again, I don't see the urgency in moving forward on this, but as you are opening this up for discussion, I think some public meetings would be advisable, and have the DeKalb County Development Authority come back and speak to us again as they did a few years ago, and offer their recommendations and assistance and see what they have to say about moving forward on this. And yeah, there's no urgency. I see you putting this off at least until summer of 2022 before you make any appointments. And one of the problems I'm seeing is that I'm not clear in understanding who it is we're trying to get on this DDA or what their qualifications may be. And so I'd like to see that clarified in the time frame of establishing this sometime next year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moore.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Quinn.
Mr. Moore actually said something, and I don't mean actually as in I'm surprised, but just caused me to speak up.
Okay.
As far as the qualifications of the DDA members,
yes,
that's an important thing to have in mind when making our appointments. And, you know, as we said, this isn't ready for the next council meeting. And so I'll write this up in a memo for the council, but just to call out the issue, there are statutory qualifications, and there's two different kinds. One involves or requires having a business in the development area. And the other involves being a resident of Clarkston. And there needs to be a certain number of each. And so I'll get the details of that to the council for y'all to be thinking about when you think about candidates.
Okay, so I guess what we need to make sure is that we have one who's going to be an elected official, one that's going to be a downtown business owner, 3 who will be tax-paying residents who do not own businesses, 3 could be tax-paying residents of the county or the city that own businesses in the downtown development area. And so you'll go ahead and provide that information to us. Is that correct, Mr. Quinn?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I'll address that and the other questions we got about the DDA in the meeting tonight.
Okay, excellent. Hearing no other questions, we'll proceed with the next.
Hold on, I did. I signed up to speak.
Oh, you did? I'm sorry, Mr. Medford. Go ahead and speak.
Thank you. So I agree with Dean. We don't need to go rushing into this. I mean, we're in the middle of an election. Part of the complaint was we had rushed into the last one a little possibly hastily. So let's not rush anything now. I can't say I was not disappointed when I went looking through the agenda packet and found the description of an exhibit item that doesn't exist. I mean, I know y'all are working on the map, but that shouldn't even be, this shouldn't even move forward until we know where, because that was the crux of the problem with the last CDA, was the location. Until we hammer down the location, it should just not even keep moving forward, especially when questions of possibly an area over on Brockett Road. I also agree with Dean that there should be some more public input on this, of where and what should be done for the DDA. I've read this thing forward and back several times. I frankly cannot find, unless it's in the state law, I don't see who does the appointing of the directors spelled out. Quinn may be able to correct me on that and say that if the state law says that explicitly the city council that does the appointing, that's great. But I'm reading the agenda packet doesn't say that, nor does it say any of the qualifications, which she just brought up, which is great. So term limits, I think, would be a good one. Also to codify in there, coming from the Charter Review Committee view of things. If it's not in writing, it doesn't happen. So we need to make sure that that's spelled out, including if we're going to allow one person from the council to be involved, then that needs to be in there. So, but I think we need to slow walk this one. Ideally, I don't know if we need to go all till next summer, like Dean was suggesting, but definitely not till the first of the year, I would think. So let's not rush into this, especially right now. There's a lot going on in the city. I don't think we're going to miss anything big by not having a DDA in place, because there's a lot of stuff that still has to go around this. How are we going to fund this? I haven't heard anything about that. Are we actually going to give them money to fund this? From how much? Those kind of questions I'd like to see. But I don't see any reason for this to be voted in the next 2 months. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Medford, for your comments. And we definitely are going to take some time with this one, and just to make sure that we had it on the agenda to start that discussion. If there's nothing else and no one else signed up, we will proceed to the next agenda item, which is E3, discuss memorial tree planting at Friendship Forest. Vice Mayor Iyasu.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I received a call from Councilwoman Robson about a month ago, and she shared with me a very peculiar story, and I shared with few council members how we could go ahead and do that, share about it with the mayor, and so decided to put it on the agenda. A few months ago, a former resident who actually grew up in Clarkston, named Blanche Hardy, she passed away, and her last wishes were, among which were to be cremated, and her cremated ashes be buried and be memorialized in a tree in Clarkston. And I would like to recognize Councilwoman Robson if she could share with us this story quickly. Thank you. That's okay, Madam Mayor?
Yes, it is.
I'll be as quick as I can, but I'm here to speak on behalf of Blanche, but I'm going to read a brief history of Blanche.
Speak to the mic, I'm sorry.
Can you stay behind the shield? Okay, and you can, and it's okay if you put your mask on, it's okay.
Okay. So a brief history of Blanche Hardy Pedrosa. She was born 4/3/1953 and died 6/2/2021. She was actually born in Sarasota, Florida. She spent her first 3 years in Sarasota, then Ocala, Florida, and then moved to Clarkston, Georgia in 1956 with her mother Betty Blackman Hardy, her father John C. Hardy, and her older siblings, sister Jacqueline, brothers Andre and Michael. The Hardy family rented the old farmhouse on Sam's property on Montreal Road, which is now part of an apartment complex. The farm was a perfect place for a kid to be, and Blanche and her brothers loved playing in the woods and wading in the South Fork of Peachtree Creek, rocking in the Brumby rockers on the wraparound front porch and walking up the long dirt driveway to Fort and Berry's Hardware, or to the drugstore at the corner of Market Street in East Ponce de Leon. Blanche loved animals, and soon the family had a small menagerie on the farm with one horse and a colt, a cow, a calf, chickens and a pig, and 2 dogs and numerous cats. Blanche really loved the horses and would later have her own. The times Blanche spent at Sam's Plantation Park House in Clarkston were very memorable for her, and they often spoke of those times later in their lives as adults. Blanche would always start reminiscing back to that special idyllic place. When we spoke of the years, she would always yearn to return there. After a very few short years that seemed endless, Blanche moved with her family in 1959 to a new house on 3 acres of land just a little over 2 miles south of Clarkston on Northern Avenue that was designed and built by her father. The design was similar to the current Clarkston Police Station and City Hall, which John Hardy also designed. They brought the horses and cows with them, and Blanche enjoyed them at her new home. The new home sat high on a hill with dogwood trees that her father planted lining the driveway and overlooking Indian Creek in the front part of the acreage, where she would again wade with her brother Mike, and where the stable was built for the horses by her father and the 2 boys. Here she would spend enjoyable hours caring for the horses and riding them to the pasture to the south side of the property to graze and ride them to their heart's content. She began going to school during these years at Avondale Elementary School with her brothers. She joined a Brownie troop where she met one of her lifelong friends, whose mom was the troop leader. They spent endless days playing together at the new house and at a friend's house on Rock Bridge Road and enjoyed playing in the woods that was a shortcut between the two. While living on Northern Avenue, there were many vacations taken by the family to Savannah, Georgia, and Tybee Island and the beach. Many long summer days were spent enjoying the sun, surf, and sand. These wonderful, heady days of Blanche's early family life sadly did not last. The family was broken up when Blanche's parents divorced in 1967. By this time, the bucolic house on Northern Avenue had to be sold, and Blanche moved with her mother and older brothers to an apartment complex on La Vista near the intersection of Cheshire Bridge Road. Some of the close friends of the family also lived there, so at least Blanche had some friends that she knew. She finished her grammar school years and started high school at North Fulton High near Buckhead. She had many friends who enjoyed just being a teenager, going dancing at a nearby teen club, summer days swimming in the complex pool. During one last family visit to Tybee Island, Blanche met her first husband. They married in 1970 and moved to Texas. It didn't take long before they were divorced 2 years later. Then tragedy struck when Blanche's mom developed lung cancer and sadly died in the mid-1970s. Blanche was always sweet, kind, and giving, and while living in Texas, she had several low-paying jobs where she met and experienced how poorly the Mexican workers were paid and treated. She took up their cause and began working to negotiate with the companies for better treatment and wages. This planted the seeds to her later work as a human resources manager in Orange County, California, where she met her husband, Javier Pedroza, and had 2 wonderful sons. Blanche continued her college education while working and raising family and graduated with a degree in anthropology and would later work on a master's degree. She continued to help her fellow workers and gave her all to her husband and sons. Tragedy struck again when she lost her father in October of 2014. And then again, tragedy hit just a few months later when her beloved husband, Javier, succumbed to a prolonged fight with cancer. Blanche had suffered in her later years with multiple sclerosis, and it contributed to her death in June of 21. It's often said that she could never go home again, but Blanche always yearned to return to the happy days of her childhood.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And I do want to say a little bit about this process. There is a company that has developed these biodegradable urns that they sell, and you can put the remains of your loved one in them, and you can opt to have a tree planted on top of them. It biodegrades. So it's not like you're trying to establish a cemetery.
Okay, all right.
So
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the only few considerations that I want to make sure I mention is that the tree be native species, and that the family and friends will be paying for the cost of the installation of the tree and planting of the tree. And I think those were the only 2 things. And the closest one to where she grew up actually would be Friendship Forest, and we thought it might be appropriate to find her rest at the Friendship Forest Park, where possibly she played when she was young. there are any questions from the council. we can
Any other
check.
questions from council?
And we have to get any answers from our city attorney as well.
So, Mr. Quinn, is there anything in terms of, since the family is going to take care of the cost of the tree as well as the actual manual labor in terms of planting it?
I don't think that those are legal problems at all. I do think that the city council still needs to approve this, because by doing so, you're committing that little bit of public property to this particular use, and not, for example, a sand volleyball court, which couldn't have a tree in it. So this kind of thing is recognized as an appropriate use of city property, but under the charter, it's a council decision to permit it or not.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Quinn. Are there any other questions from the council?
Would there be an expectation of any sort of marker other than the tree?
No expectations. Are there any questions or comments from the public? Hearing none, Mr. Gomez, did anyone sign up for this item?
No.
Okay. And I
I
don't,
just got a quick question from
Sure.
the council. I'm not sure if Councilwoman Robson will come back next week. Do we have any questions for her? Do you
No, I
think
think-
she want to come back maybe next week as well?
No, I would be more than happy to come
Okay.
back.
Awesome.
But as well, I do want to plant a little seed. I do think that the maintenance of that tree should also be addressed in what you vote on. And I have not really spoken with my friends about that, but as far as a memorial plaque goes, I'm not sure that would be a bad idea because it would identify the location, and I would think that would be maybe an important thing to do. But that's up to you for your consideration. But I think identifying that location, at least temporarily, if not permanently, would help towards the maintenance of the tree itself, and making sure that it doesn't get inundated by whatever might be growing in Friendship Forest. So, but then again, also I do think that the 3-year stipulation of 3 years of maintenance, which by the way, I'm perfectly happy to do. I am a landscaper. I'm just over in Champlain, perfectly happy to come and visit once a month to be sure that the tree is thriving.
thank you. Vice Mayor Yasi, anything
Yeah,
else?
I just would feel, I think, I personally don't see any problem with the small plaque or something small that just mentions her name and that this is in her memorial. That's pretty much.
So that would be something that if the family or those who would like to do, then that would be something they would do.
Yes, absolutely.
Nothing else?
Would there be any issue with any of this just because it is a nature preserve? Because it is a nature, we're talking about Friendship Forest, and it is a nature preserve. So I'm just asking the question more.
It's just another additional tree, which is native species.
I mentioned with the plaque and things like that. Like we've talked about plaques to identify species,
Right.
so this is slightly different.
And I
Just want to make sure we're not.
Like a simple sign, like Blanche's tree or something, and people who knew would know without
Right.
turning it into a memorial.
Right.
And I don't have an issue in principle with it, it's just more because we have a specific designation for that.
Okay. Thank you for bringing that point up, Councilman Perkins. Anything else? Yes. Ms. Mead.
I think it would be better to be allowed.
Keep speaking to the mic, please.
I think it would be better them to be allowed to put them on memory tree here in fact.
Okay,
Because it would be good memory.
okay,
And it would be good for you guys.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mead. Thank you so much for that. Nothing else?
I think Mr. Hadlock has his hand up.
Mr. Hadlock?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
I wasn't able to hear much or understand much of what was being said about this lady. I think that if you're going to put a marker there, it might be good if the marker included something of the connection between her and Friendship Forest, and I couldn't hear clearly what that was. But otherwise, we could get people expecting wanting to donate a tree and expecting a marker there for, I'm not sure that would be a great idea. It might not be an issue, but, I think that it'd be nice if it had her name on it and said some kind of, friend of nature and Friendship Forest, whatever, longtime lover of nature and visitor to Friendship Forest. I don't, but to me, that would be nice. And you just do one about the size of the brass marker on the bench for Ben Glover.
Right.
Get that many words on there.
Okay.
And
Thank
then
you.
yeah, that's all the only recommendations I would make. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think we certainly can take public input on what they would like, and we could definitely consider what the family would like, and then we try to reconcile it and think.
So as you are the co-chairs of the Environment Committee, we can defer that to you. Is that fine? Okay, we'll do that. Thank you. Hearing nothing else, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which says E4, and that is to discuss adopting a hotel motel tax. Vice Mayor Yasu.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, last in August, at the beginning of this month, we attended, me and Councilmember Johnson, we attended the Georgia Municipal Association convention, and one of the classes I took was about tourism and how it can be used for development in the community. And it caught my attention that in July 1st, there has been a new law that actually was already effective, and that impacts that possibly could bring a little more revenue to the city. I just want to say a little background about the Georgia hotel motel taxation history. So in 1975, the Georgia State Legislature passed allowing cities to impose up to 3% of excise hotel motel tax, or some people call it lodging tax. And in 2008, that was revised into 3 parts. The first one was to allow cities 1 to 3% tax. The second part allows them to have 5%. The third part allows them either to have 6 to 8%. However, the last one requires Georgia Assembly Act, while the first one, which is 3% and the 5%, can be done with the city council passing an ordinance. But the 5% is a little more complicated, while the other one, the 6 to 8%, is a lot more complicated. So in light of that, since also we have to wait for the legislature to approve it, I would strongly encourage the city council to consider adopting a 3% lodging excise tax. And that way, once we adopt that, we can start getting the revenue. I don't know how much it would be. In the next year or so, we can amend it. Anytime, we can amend it to 5%, we can amend it to 8%. Right now, DeKalb County is charging 8%. But they are following, they know all the rules, and they've been doing it for a long time. So in the future, we could study, and we could also reach out to our legislature and make sure it's okay with them. And but even if we don't do anything right now, we're not gonna nothing is going to change. But the only thing is, if the city does not have an ordinance according to the new law, all the revenue will go to the county. So basically, we're going to forfeit that 3%. So right now, all hotels pay sales tax, which is 6 to 8%. Plus, they pay $5 per room per night, which is for state fee, hotel motel fee, which is actually goes to the Department of Transportation. It's directly taken out by the Georgia Department of Revenue. So the only one we can actually control is the Georgia local hotel motel excise tax. And the process is we adopt the ordinance, which is 3%, let's say, and so we adopt it. We send a copy of it to the Department of Community Affairs Office, Office of Research, and that's it. And they will update our tax rate among the other rates in the state. Right now, there are about 24 localities that use the 3% tax rate. Most localities in counties, they use either the 5%, about 79 localities use that, and the other ones use, a lot of them, they use the 8%. So that might be a little bit of competitive edge. And I do remember I asked it as a question to one of the speakers at the GMA convention, that if we need a hotel or motel right now within the city, and he said we don't need to have anything. So what happened is, so starting from July 1st, the tax rate, which was only impacting hotels and motels and also cabins or any other lodging services, now that tax has been extended to Airbnb and other online-based lodging services. And the way it works is they charge that, whatever rate is in that locality, they charge that tax regardless if the city doesn't have it, they will just take the county's rate. They charge it every month they send it to the subsequent whatever jurisdiction that's in there. So if we don't do anything, the way it works is the guests of that of anybody who stays in that jurisdiction, they pay the whatever rate it is. It's taken out of not the owner of the property, but the guests, and then it's collected by Airbnb or whoever is doing that service, that online app or whatever it is. So it's charged on the app platform and collected the money, and then they send it to respective municipality or county every month, I believe. So if you don't do anything, I don't know how much we could ask probably the county, but I'm pretty sure there are some people utilizing the online apps. So it might not be a lot, but it wouldn't hurt having, so that we don't have to leave any money on the table. In 2018, I did a little research. DeKalb County, using their 8% tax, they received $2.7 million of hotel and motel taxes, but they do have a lot of hotels and motels within DeKalb County. And if there are any questions, I would love to. And I just want to clarify on the agenda, we have the sample, but that sample is pretty much for the 6, 7, and 8% rate. But it can be used the same. You can use the same model ordinance, and Stephen can format it to be the 3% one. The 3% one is pretty simple, just 2-page one. I saw the City of Fairburns. I also attached it, but it's not added to the agenda. But we can include it. If necessary, hopefully we could. If Stephen can get it ready by next week, we can get it next week. But it's not a rush. So, but the only thing is we're just going to be leaving money on the table. So Yeah, go ahead now. I can
Okay, all right, thank you, Vice Mayor. Y'all see Councilman Carroll, you had something. you
I have a
wanted to add.
question, just to make sure I understand this right. So if you're operating, say, an Airbnb in Clarkston right now, you are paying this tax just to DeKalb County, not to Clarkston.
Yes.
So if,
I think we need to clarify that. I
No.
don't believe you're allowed to collect a tax in one jurisdiction for another. So we will have to clarify whether that is happening. I just pulled up an article that states that the tax is only applicable in the unincorporated areas, and then each city that levies the tax levies and collects that tax. But we'll clarify that.
I did quite extensive research on it. So the way it works is you can't get taxed twice, of course, but they use the county rate if the cities does not have any rate or any. So there are two taxing authorities within a county. There could be unincorporated is the county controls it, but if there are cities with a tax rate within an incorporated area, the the county cannot tax them.
Okay.
So the tax, but this is just a new law, so it's still in the works, but starting from July 1st, technically DeKalb County is collecting any money on the tax that is being paid by any Airbnb that's been used within the city of Clarkston, because we don't have one. So by default, we forfeit it basically.
Okay.
and City Attorney Quinn, do you know the answer to that, or?
So, well, I reviewed the law in preparation for tonight's meeting. And what happened with this recent amendment is that the state expanded the definition of an innkeeper. So it used to be, an innkeeper is who is supposed to collect and remit this tax. And the definition used to be such that it wasn't clear whether it applied to an Airbnb, and Airbnb took the position that it did not and did not collect the tax. Now it's been modified to where it clearly applies to every kind of short-term rental less than 30 days. No matter what it is or whether you use online, it definitely applies. Now that the thing about the definition of innkeeper that they created, it includes within that definition that the innkeeper is licensed or assessed an occupation tax by the city or county imposing the tax. So I believe that as a technical matter, just based on reading the law and not knowing how it's operating, just by reading it on the page, I think that DeKalb County should not be able to collect from places within any municipal jurisdiction. However, I think it's quite possible that Airbnb would do exactly what the vice mayor said, in the absence of having information from Clarkston, that they would just pay it to DeKalb. I don't know that, but that seems entirely possible, if not likely to me, based on now they expect to pay, they make these deals state by state, and they made a deal at the General Assembly that we weren't privy to, but obviously they know that now, and I looked on their website and they said, they have a state by state, and it said in Georgia, we remit to the local jurisdiction. So they're expecting to pay it, and it might very well be that they would send monies from Clarkston Airbnbs to DeKalb County.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Quinn. And you brought up a point that the person who's considered the innkeeper, they have to be licensed in the local jurisdiction, correct?
Right, that's exactly correct. Either licensed or charged an occupation tax, which you can't really do without requiring a license. And so in order to follow the letter of this new law in imposing a Clarkston tax, we would need to require anyone we want to pay it to get a license from Clarkston.
I just got a comment on that. I mean, I'm not an attorney, but I made sure I learned about it. So right now, there is no city or county regulating Airbnb. So they were not paying any taxes in the past, and the hotel industry was not happy about it. So what happened is the state legislature made it now playing field where everybody paid the same amount of taxes. So in the past, Airbnb and other online platform-based lodging services, they were just not paying any kind of taxes. So so that wasn't fair technically for the hotel industry, and now that we made playing field. But Airbnb technically is an online platform, so it's not. But however, yes, the city can actually we can regulate it absolutely, but we can do it separately. Right now, all we're doing is setting up a rate, a tax excise rate, and add it to our ordinance. And based on that, whatever tax is being collected by Airbnb will be sent to us. So if we don't do anything, nothing happens. All that's going to happen is Airbnb is going to send to the county. And if I'm wrong on that, I'm ready to be corrected, but I'm pretty sure I did ask the question, so Mr. Quinn can get the verification, but I know that the county is going to get the whatever we do. If we don't do anything, the county is going to get the money. And by the way, it also can give the city a competitive advantage. That's what I heard also, that because the counties and other municipalities, they're charging 8%, which means 3% is a lot better than 8%. And that is something that gives the whatever jurisdiction an advantage. And I don't mind us doing the 8%, although it is pretty complicated. I mean, and sadly, whatever you take more than 3%, you can't really use it for whatever you want. It has a lot of restrictions on the limit on the spending. So the 3% is the easiest one, and it does not have any limits. You can use it for general budget, except that if you spend something for other purposes other than the general budget, next year you have to do the same thing in subsequent years. That's the only limitation that I saw. But other than that, there is no restriction on what you can use it for. So if the council says, "Oh, we just are not gonna, we're just gonna forfeit what we don't want to get the money," okay, well that's fine. But I'm pretty sure this is just straightforward. We adopt the ordinance, have a 3% tax rate. We send it to the Department of Community Affairs and let them know that we have this new ordinance. And based on that, whoever stays, if there is anything being charged in the city, because they're going to get taxed regardless what we say, because that's the state law. So the only difference is who gets the money.
Well, okay, thank you for that clarification, Vice Mayor Yasu. What I'm also hearing, in addition to us making sure we take care of this tax, I'm hearing we also, and Mr. Quinn, correct me if I'm wrong, that we need to ensure that whoever is functioning in the city of Clarkston also has a business permit to do so, because they are actually running a business by having the Airbnb. And as a local municipality, that's something else that we need to ensure that we have that process in place. Is that correct, Mr. Quinn?
So this is maybe hair splitting, but
Okay.
I guess that's what lawyers do.
Thank you.
I'm not saying that we should or must regulate Airbnbs by requiring them to have a license from Clarkston.
Right.
I'm saying that's something we can do.
Okay.
And then separately, the way I read the text of the lodging tax law, they would not technically be subject to it unless we require licenses from them. And so if we adopted the 3% hotel motel, I don't know for sure whether Airbnb would pay. Like I said earlier, I think Vice Mayor Yasu may very well be right that they would. But if they wanted to go to court and take it to that level, we would not be strictly complying with the letter of them as to Airbnb. Of course, we would want to, you know, a hotel or a motel that's an ongoing, you know, a business place that's only used for that, they would already fall under our occupation tax. So we do require a license from them. My understanding is that we just don't have any. And also that we may not have them as a permitted use in zoning.
Right. So I think that's something, and Ms. Cowie, can you speak on that as well?
Well, currently the zoning that permits hotels is the town center. But based on, it will depend on how we formulate the definition of the hotel, because based on this definition that is in this document, they have rooming houses as part of their hotel definition. So it would, you know, be to our advantage to make sure that we define the areas. Right now, hotel is a permitted use in the town center. And that's the only district, unless we include rooming houses as a part of the definition.
But we currently don't allow rooming houses
Well, rooming houses are allowed
in certain zones.
It's allowed in 2 zoning districts, the RC and NRCD has rooming houses as a permitted use.
Because we have had a request from a gentleman who purchased the property to convert it to a short-term rental, but our zoning did not allow at the location. This was within, I think, the last year.
That's correct.
So we do have some zones that allow for short-term rentals, but again, no hotels and et cetera. And Stephen, you can clarify, but the change that just occurred is, as you stated, expanding the definition of an innkeeper, correct?
That is correct. Yes, it just kind of, it expanded it to the point where if you're renting any place for less than 30 days at a time, then you're basically considered an innkeeper, subject to what I mentioned before, that you also are supposed to be regulated by the taxing jurisdiction for it to apply to you.
Correct. And currently, I think, Ms. Cowie, in those zones, we would levy the business tax.
If
If there
our
were-
definition is the same and consistent with the definition that they have before.
Okay.
And
Yes.
I have a clarification question. So, Mr. Quinn, you may have mentioned this, how it will cover hearings because of the circumstances, but would that, would the business permitting, this actually might be a question for you, Ms. Starr, would the business permitting fall on the homeowner, the property owner, or would it fall on Airbnb as a company?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Sorry, was this one for somebody else?
That's for you, Mr. Quinn.
That is
Okay.
correct.
So, I mean, that's a great question. And I think that you could write the ordinance up in a way that would direct it in any of those directions. I mean, to me, and maybe if we got further into this and I thought about it more and looked at it more, my recommendation might change. But my first impression recommendation would be that that kind of license requirement should be directed at the local person, which to me would be basically who owns the property. And then I would give them a chance to designate a local agent or any agent. So for example, if I owned the house and I wanted to do Airbnb, but I didn't want to have to deal with coming to City Hall and paying for a license, then I might strike a deal with Airbnb where they had to take care of that function for me and sign up with the city as being responsible. Now, whether that's practical for Airbnb to do that, I don't know. So I think you raised a great question. And I know from prior discussions in another municipality that the more you talk about regulating the Airbnbs, the more questions come up. And there are all kinds of concerns and thoughts that different people have about them.
Okay. So for the discussion, and Vice Mayor, where we're talking about this motel tax, what is it that we need to do move forward?
Let's just go back a little bit now. because we are mixing up two different things. I said the reason that I brought this agenda item was because of a new law. And let's just forget about Airbnb at this point. Let's just have a hotel motel tax.
That's what I
That's
asked
all we
Mr.
need to
Quinn.
do right now.
Right.
Forget about the hotel motel. I mean, forget about the Airbnb. Let's act like there's no Airbnb right now. So let's adapt a hotel, motel, or let's call it lodging tax, whatever we want to call it, and let's adapt it. We don't need to have a hotel or motel to adapt that ordinance. So as soon as we adopt that ordinance, we can get a copy of that signed by Madam Mayor. We're gonna send it to the DCA, and let's just wait and see if we're gonna start receiving money. If we don't receive money, that means Airbnb is not remitting the money to us. So we can actually start asking, and this is done by Department of Community Affairs. They will respond to all the questions that we have. Madam Mayor can call them and ask them how this thing works. But right now, let's just adapt a hotel motel tax rate for the city.
Okay. And Councilwoman Johnson.
I just have a question.
Sure.
If we adopt the tax, who are we gonna, and then we don't have hotels or motels.
I said we don't need to have one.
Right, where are we gonna get money from?
Let's just do it. We don't need to have one. So that in future, maybe somebody's gonna come to town center and we can use that rate. But let's just adapt the rate. That's what I'm saying. We have that ordinance, nothing. We're not losing anything by adapting having an ordinance. The only thing we're losing is we're leaving money on the table that the county is gonna get it. So
County's not
We
getting,
have hotels and motels. We don't have these things, so we're not losing anything.
the county's not getting any money from parks.
Right. So
Mr. Gomez, I don't know about that, but according to the new state law, they anybody who gets Airbnb in Georgia is gonna pay taxes. And that tax is gonna be collected and is gonna be sent to any taxing authority, whichever is in that jurisdiction. I mean, this is a new law, so if you have not check it out and research it if you have to for yourself. But I did my part and I brought it to the agenda. I brought it to your attention. It's up to the council if you don't want to adopt it. I mean,
well, Vice Mayor Yasu, thank you for being very diligent in your training and you bringing it back to us. So I want to say thank you for that, because it sounds like you had a wonderful time in terms of getting that educational material. So number one, I want to thank you and Councilwoman Johnson for doing that and taking time and bringing things to the council, correct? Number two is, you know, we're looking at that because you made also the point that you gave examples of what Fairburn and some of the other ones in the packet. So that will require additional work for Mr. Quinn to make it ready and prepared. So we may not have it ready for the next by-council meeting, but we'll make sure in terms of not leaving any money on the table that we'll take all the information that we received today and anything that we need to do further to clarify it so that we're prepared to take care of the tax. Does that sound fair?
It sounds fair. And the one with the, I just want to read a little bit about the Fairburn ordinance. It says, so yes, I agree. It's going to say like this. An excise tax is to be charged within the city upon the furnishing of value to the public on any room, lodging, or accommodation furnished by any person or legal entity licensed by the required to pay business or occupational tax to the city for operating within the city, a hotel, a motel, inn, lodge, tourist camp, tourist cabin, or any other place within which rooms, lodgings, or accommodations are regularly furnished for value.
Right.
So that kind of covers all these things, including Airbnb. We don't even have to mention Airbnb. There is no mention there. And that's from Fairburn. And it says the tax must not be applied to rooms furnished for once or forth more than a day by the state or local government officials, and also if somebody else his house burned or something.
Right.
And what else? It says they have 3%, and this is not, doesn't cover if somebody stays more than 30 days in that place. So we just acting like somebody's coming to the city, he's gonna have a motel tax. So we have this ready for him.
Right,
And we can change the rate anytime if you want.
right. But if you read that first part.
Yeah.
And that first part said something about that person being licensed.
I know.
Correct?
I really know.
So we need to make sure, as we're looking at this text,
Right.
and we're moving forward with the information that you provided, that we also work in conjunction with the staff to ensure that we have whatever permits and things that we need on that end as well.
I
So
know.
it goes hand in hand.
No, I agree, but
Okay.
the thing is, we just complicating it for ourselves because we're not trying. I mean, I don't think any city in Georgia is regulating. Nobody's regulating Airbnb. There's no city regulating Airbnb. So we can certainly make sure we limit it within the city, within the zone, but we need a different ordinance for that. Not within. This is just to set up a tax rate. Period. This has nothing to do with where it's going to be done or how it's going to be done. Regardless, it is happening in the city. I'm pretty sure there are some people doing Airbnb, and regardless, they still going to pay taxes, which is 8% from with the county, since we don't have one. And somebody's going to get that tax money if we don't do anything.
Okay. So good.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the council? Right, Councilman Carroll.
Last thing I'll say is that I think maybe someone could reach out to the cab to see if they are actually collecting the Clarkston Airbnb money.
Okay. So we'll ask staff to make sure that we find that information out. Thank you. And we'll now have comments from the community. Ms. Nina. Talk in the mic.
I have a question. That hotel motel, I don't think there is a money ready there, city of Clarkston. And I think it is very good. And Anthony still moving to see, I mean, to look at that.
Okay.
Because if we argue, we say, money ready is there, I don't think there's money ready. Maybe it's what you have.
Okay. Thank you. And we'll have comments. Did anyone sign up, Mr.
No, Mr. Moore.
That's hand raised.
Okay, so Mr. Moore and then Mr. Medford.
They're gonna love that before we
Whoever.
Can you please mute if you're not talking?
Okay. At this time.
Yeah, I didn't have my hand up on this, but yeah, I didn't think Airbnbs were well defined in our ordinance anywhere, and certainly should be addressed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. And Mr. Medford?
Yes, so looking through the sample ordinance, heavens, please let Stephen rewrite this. It's got typos in it. There are sections in here that absolutely do not apply to us in this Stonecrest ordinance. I mean, usage of the revenue derived from the tax is completely, we don't have a tourism bureau or conventions or trade show promotions. There's some areas in here that concern me, especially in the section H, where the finance director, if they're not happy with the money being returned, they can recalculate it themselves and charge what they think is appropriate. That's kind of horrifying and frankly an abuse of power. I think this needs to be looked at through the lens of our own city charter and our own city government to make sure it lines up with how we run our city. There's some mentions in here just to spell out where city manager, what's city council, what's the mayor's job, things like that. Make sure we line up. And also, so I looked up there's 9 Airbnbs when there are city limits right now. Most people I know that do Airbnb are people who need the money. If we're going to force people to get a business license, which is a whole nother problem in our city unto itself, you're basically going to either kill Airbnb in our city or drive it underground. So now people are just going to go on Facebook Marketplace and place their room for rent, or they're going to go on Craigslist. And you're never going to see a cent of it. So think real hard about what the goal is, because I mean, the rooms are only like $24 a night in some places in the city. Just to recoup what we're going to spend on Mr. Quinn spending on this may take a year or 2 or 3 just in the tax we're going to generate. I don't think this is in any way, shape, or form a priority unless somebody's trying to build a hotel downtown that I haven't heard about yet. So this needs to be slow walked and absolutely run through a fine filter to make sure it matches up with exactly what you're doing. Even as Dean said, Airbnb isn't really defined in our city. We need to, it needs to be addressed. But we need to ask why we're doing this, because if it's to generate money, it's not going to do it. We're not going to generate a ton of tax revenue on this. It may just be better to wait until somebody wants to put a hotel in the city and wait and let the people who are doing this because they need the money keep doing it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Medford. Okay, so I think that concludes this agenda item. So we'll move on to E5, which is to discuss COVID-19 gift cards. And we'll start with Councilman Carroll.
Yes, so last month, the city council allocated $10,000 to provide $50 gift cards for all the Clarkston residents or the 30021 residents that got a COVID vaccine within Clarkston. And if I understand correctly, that purchased 200 gift cards, all of which were used up in the last month. So that's a good sign. And just from word of mouth, talking to some of the physicians at these clinics, I think it was an effective program. Talking to the staff that handed out the gift cards, I think it's an effective program. I can just speak personally that several Clarkston residents did contact me and ask about the gift card and ask where they could get a vaccine. So they've heard the rumor that they could get the gift card with the vaccine. So I think it is effective on bringing some people along that may be somewhat vaccine skeptical, but not vaccine skeptical enough to be outweighed by a $50 gift card. So now that money has been spent up, I would suggest increasing the money so the program can continue and we can continue to offer gift cards to Clarkston residents. I know there's been some suggestion of having $50 for the first shot and then maybe $25 for the second shot to make sure that people come back for their second shot as well. Because I've heard some people get the first shot and then don't come back for the second shot. But I'm open to council suggestions on the exact amount, and maybe we could increase it even above 10,000 so we don't have to keep on coming back every month to do this.
So, Council, did you have any ideas? Because if we want to just make it where it's, because we're almost at the end of the year, and we have September, October, November, December. We're gonna have. Are we thinking about the booster shot or just the regular vaccination?
I think at this point, the last I saw, August 17th, we have about a 42% vaccination rate in Clarkston. And so I think at this point, we're just trying to get people to get something.
Okay.
If I may, one easy way to think about this is, for about every 50,000 we spend on gift cards, if we're able to get 2 vaccines out of it, that's about 7% of our population that gets vaccinated. Again, those are sort of rough numbers. I'm hearing some fairly discouraging news, I think, in terms of where our ICU capacities are at in the state, as well as nationally. I have anecdotally, personally, had a significant number of people close to me who have been hospitalized, or friends of friends who have actually passed away, who are unvaccinated as well. I think all indications, point to the vaccine being the most effective. Certainly not the only thing that needs to be addressed, but I would say the most critical thing that we need to have happen if we are to continue to move forward as a community and as a country, and hopefully find our way out of our current health crisis. And so I personally would suggest that we, maybe consider tying it to a second vaccine or to a completed dosage. I had the Johnson & Johnson and I have it, so I knocked it out easy, didn't have any additional assignments for myself. But I think we should consider doing 50, perhaps even 100,000 of this, since everything else is tied on the food distribution that we're doing, the rent assistance, everything else. It's not going to matter if we can't keep, get people back to work, get people back to where they can go to school safely. And our vaccination rate is our way out of this.
Okay, so do you want to do this 50 now? Move forward with 50?
I would certainly support that. I like the idea of starting it in increments and then considering it every month at the end of the year.
Councilwoman Hopkins? Let's do the head shake.
My concern is that we're probably being selective and that we haven't put anything into, or we have not put a lot into translations of information about the free vaccines or, the cards for the vaccines.
Okay.
So it will really reel in those who are English speaking, but over 50% of our population is foreign born. I think we should really put some money in getting information out into the apartments in multiple languages. I mean, even a citywide mailer postcards that has, 7 languages in it, get your free vaccine here, call here.
Okay.
In 7 languages on one card. That would cost $10,000, but we haven't done it. And I think a lot of people might not have gotten it, not just because they're resistant, but because they don't know about it. We haven't reached them.
So what we can do is designate 50,000 for specifically vaccinations, and then have an additional amount for mail to mail out the information with translation. If you notice when we had the health fair, we did have a lot of our refugee immigrant community out there, and that was something that happened with our partner support. So what we can do is, as a council, make sure in terms of the money to take care of the vaccinations, but then also make sure that we have enough funding to send out mail, because one of the other comments that has also come out is that some people don't even know about the rental assistance as well. So if there's some way we can put a mailer out, have someone to assist us to make sure in terms of getting the right translations and everything out to our community.
If I could add,
Yes.
the between the IRC, International Rescue Committee, Attendee Health, CORE, the information where to go get vaccinated is in multiple languages. We didn't produce it, they did. So out of the 200 cards that have been issued, I think it's 203, I will tell you that probably 80% spoke very little English. They were foreign born, far and away, because thanks to Attendee Health, they had translators to help to better explain, and not just the gift card process, but what the vaccination is. There are considerable number of videos that were issued, distributed. Refugee Women's Network, Women's Watch Africa, they've done a phenomenal job of getting the information out as well. At the health fair that occurred on August the 23rd at Oasis Daycare, easily more than we gave 135 vaccinations were issued by CORE. I think over 100 were maybe close to 100 were foreign-born individuals. Again, they had interpreters, translators. CORE does a phenomenal job. They have the information and folks that speak, I think, up to 10 different languages. Attendee Health has about 4 or 5 languages, depending who is working. I agree with what the mayor just said. We can certainly, that will allocate it however the council would like to allocate it. But I just wanted to be clear that the word is getting out. And one day at Attendee Health, out of 40 individuals who attended, I think about 30 were were Burmese or from Myanmar, because that's who Attendee Health essentially targeted or requested it at a couple of the through whatever communities there. I think the Burmese Romanian community of Georgia. So it is getting out there. We're not quite, I think what Councilman Perkins said, we're not where we hope to be, but it is getting, and it has improved.
If I could add to that.
Vice Mayor Jackson.
I definitely agree, incentivizing using gift cards. I honestly was a beneficiary of
Conflict of interest.
I waited until we passed that. Well, but Mr. Gomez, so you said 135 people received the shots that day?
Yes, and we issued 133 gift cards to people.
So everybody was receiving the gift card, not just sit down?
Yes, there's just no, it's almost impossible to, you have people who show up and then, what do you mean, I don't receive one, but they do? It's, similar to when food is distributed, it's just too difficult to do that. Did that the first few days and a couple people got upset. So
And to
we
your
could
point,
continue to do that, but I don't support.
well, see, the bottom line is, we are concerned about our residents, making sure everybody gets vaccinated who can get vaccinated.
So
And
should we change it or I don't know if we have to just leave it there because we said 30021 only.
Okay.
That was the idea.
Okay.
That's fine.
So that's fine if we want to make sure just to be in compliance. Thank you for bringing that compliance piece. So we'll make sure when we vote next week that we're making sure that we designate the funds to be given to anyone who comes into our city to get a vaccination. Is that fair enough?
That's fair
Okay,
enough.
perfect. We'll do it that way. Okay. And any other questions from the council?
I did have a.
Yes, a follow-up. You
Just to
did.
your point, Councilwoman Hopkins, I think one, it takes a long time to get things translated into multiple languages, and I completely agree with you on the importance of getting the news out. But to Mr. Gomez's point as well, I think if we're looking at expediency, my suggestion would be that we, if we want to allocate a portion to maybe reimburse printing costs, I believe there were some challenges to reimbursement that Mr. Quinn brought up at some point. My suggestion is we leverage the network that we already have. The most effective initiatives that I've seen come out of the city have been when we have leaned into the trusted relationships that our nonprofit partners, our mosque leaders, our church leaders, our numerous groups that we have in the community, and communicate with them. I know Madam Mayor is on a number of task force and communication items as well. I think it would be fairly easy to get this information out and say, hey, tell your people, this is what we're doing. I would support going above the 50,000 if we wanted to include something to cover printing costs, just so we can get as much of that towards incentivizing vaccines as much as possible.
Well, that's why I wanted to make sure we separated the two so we could say 50 would be specifically for vaccinations and maybe just to be on the safe side from now till then, maybe 20,000 to cover the cost of any type of printing or mailing that we would need to do.
Sure.
Is that?
I think it's already post. I mean, that's already covered. Anything that the city is spending for COVID related is a COVID expense. So I don't see even why we have to specify 20,000 or whatnot. Anything, including, I mean, that's what Mr. Gomez, he already budgeted it for everything, including expenses for the city, whatever we're spending for COVID related is being spent, including police.
But even when we did the hazard pay, we had to say what percentage we were going to do with that hazard pay too, that we were going to use that for that.
Yeah, but it's already included. What I meant is right now, let's just deal with it, 50,000, that's good, and let's increase it to 50,000 and let's leave it there. But we need to encourage the city manager to spend more money on translation and encouraging more different cultures to attend and get the information in their own language.
Okay. Mr. Gomez, in terms of any additional funding on that end, do we need to make sure that we allocate in additional funding, or how do you?
Well, just as you said, we would allocate to the partners that we have to translate, and we'll create mailers and send them out. What was very effective is to have these types of a group event or an event. That was extremely helpful because you're enticing people. Not only are you receiving a gift card, but there are other services that you can receive with food. That's why we had 135 receive their vaccination on August 23rd.
Right. Okay. All right. Anything else with this matter? From the community? Yes. Okay. We'll let you, Councilman
I have one other thing. So I understand that the city staff has been present every time the gift cards are handed out. And I know some of the clinics like Attendee do vaccination 3 days a week. Is it administrative for the city staff to be there all the time, or is it?
Well, to a certain extent, yes, but we're coming up with a solution for that going forward, because we really need to have probably somebody, not necessarily somebody doing it for free, but we're going to look to figure out a better way than to have just city staff up there.
Right, because it just seemed kind of inefficient, you know, at May 3 days a week for 8 hours giving vaccines to have a city staff member sitting there all 3 of those days. It just seems like maybe even, I don't know if we could allow Attendee to do it and monitor it, or if there's some other way to do it that doesn't require city staff to literally sit there.
Well, I did ask that question of the organizations. They didn't seem very, that really wanting to do that for them to manage it. And I can understand that from kind of an accounting and process, but there'll be a better way to do that. Fortunately, the longest time has been core at the Clarkston First Baptist from 10 until 4, but we didn't have somebody there that entire time. The longest time was at that health fair, which was from 10 until, I believe the last vaccination was administered almost at 4. So, and then the Attendee has been administering vaccinations from 9:30 in the morning until 1 or 1:30.
Okay.
So again, up to 4 hours. To my knowledge, nobody has been out more than 6 hours at a time here in Clarkston.
Outstanding. Hearing none from the community, Ms. Mia. We can hear you on the mic.
Oh, my, okay. Okay. I didn't hear very well, Mayor, Begley, what you say about are you guys going to send gift cards in the mailbox?
No. So what happens is that when people go to events where we have vaccinations, or they go to like Attendee and other places like that, as part of them getting their shot, they'll get a gift card.
Oh, yeah.
What we want to make sure is that we're getting all the community to know about it. And so that's where the mailer comes into play. Okay.
So we need the translators, flyers
Mm-hmm.
from Hindus, from every foreigners who are here. So we have Barendra. Barendra, he has a temple.
Right.
In the temple there.
Right.
So we can call them. You can call Barendra first.
Okay.
And inform about it. And the pastor, which I told you in the Barmin pastor in Nazareth Church.
Yes.
He has a PS restaurant.
Yes.
He has a lot of
Okay.
so I have a pastor who was here in the neighborhood. In Chaka.
Okay.
So we can call those members of the church.
Okay.
Okay, we have different mosques here.
Mm-hmm.
Al-Mu'minin, Turkey, Al-Sunnah. So they are Somali language.
Okay.
And English language.
Okay.
And Arabic language.
Okay.
So we have in this Adam church, there is some families, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So that one. And they let us to go to the mailbox.
Okay. Okay. So that's good. And what we'll make sure is that we have collaborations with the partners, and we'll definitely work with them to ensure that whatever needs to be translated, that we work with those communities.
So Rohingya, I will check them.
Okay.
I ask myself.
Okay.
Thank you.
And if you need translate in Swahili, 9 languages are ready.
All right.
Good.
Thank you, Ms. Amina. Okay. From the community on the Zoom, is there anyone else?
Warren Hadlock has his hand up.
Yes,
Don't know
Mr.
if Robin-
Hadlock.
Well, I wanted to say once again that I oppose rewarding antisocial and reckless behavior, which is what you folk are doing. But if you're going to pay these ransomware gift cards, then maybe you could, it sounds like you're giving it to them whenever they show up for the first shot. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, it seems practical to me that it's really essential to have both shots. Why don't you make them show their vaccination card when they come back and get their second shot and give them this little ransomware gift card? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hadlock. Anyone else? No one else?
No,
No
it's not
one
a hand
else,
up.
Mr. Carroll. Okay, with that being said, I'll entertain a motion. Well, we can just say move to adjourn. All right,
Move to
thank you,
adjourn.
everyone.
Thank you.
Next.